Hello, everybody. It is lovely as always to see you all. And as anybody who's been on when I've been moderating these before, you know this is my favorite part of the evening where I can see everybody and see the faces and the cameras start coming on. So I hope you've had a good day. Thank you for joining us this evening. I know that the weather is nice and the restrictions are lifting. So I suspect that there may be a lower attendance rates at our webinars for a while, but we know that you like to see them recorded. So we're continuing with them till the end of the season, and then you can see them on record. So you're very welcome, colleagues, here this evening. And I'm Katrina Bradley. I'm the director of the Irish Institute of Pharmacy. And I am joined this evening by a colleague and friend, Katrina Campbell. She's the head of staff learning and development in RCSI, which is the University of Medical and Health Sciences, where the institute is based. She has her degree in psychology. She has a master's in business studies. She's got diplomas in leadership and coaching, and she's loads of experience. But more importantly, she is just a wonderful font of wisdom, and somebody I often connect in with, and I'm really, really fortunate to have as part of my network. And that's actually the topic of this evening. We're going to be talking about making connections and networks. And I think it's wonderful that we have this network that has established within the Institute, and people have said they've really enjoyed seeing everybody on the webinars. I wonder though sometimes, have our networks and our strong connections really been restricted to the people we already know, and extending out to people who maybe we've lost touch with or that we don't know can sometimes be a little intimidating. So Katrina's here this evening to help us get our heads around how we can network and how we can make connections and build on connections we already have. Now, I'm not going to go through all the housekeepings. Everybody seems to have their microphones on mute, which is great. If you need any questions, the chat box is there. If you need any help, Audrey is with us and she'll be supporting us throughout the evening. And let's just hand over to Katrina and have a really interesting and engaging session. And you know what I'm like, I may be jumping in and out. I sometimes find it hard to stay quiet, but if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and we'll pose them, Katrina, as we go along. So Katrina, can I hand over to you, please?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Katrina. And hello, everybody. I'm delighted that you could join us here this evening. Hang on now while I get my slides started here. Oops. I'll bring this back here. Okie dokes. Perfect, great. So hi everybody, I was with you and maybe some of you were at the first webinar that I did for the IIOP approximately a year ago when we were in a very different space. At that stage I was here speaking with you about leading teams through COVID. I think you could probably all give your own webinar on that now, anybody who's in a team leadership position, having lived through it. Our lived experience is so important. But now that we're beginning to emerge at the other end, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. One of the topics that I think is quite important for us to give some attention to is the topic of connection. And that's where the title for our session this evening comes from, around strengthening our connections. So Katrina had shared a survey that she ran with the profession a number of months ago. I think one thing that really struck me was a number of comments from respondents about feeling isolated, about feeling, that they were trying to cope on their own, about feeling overwhelmed. And so we had a conversation around how well connected are people within pharmacy, what's the strength of the teams in the workplace, the interpersonal connections, the professional networking. And that's how we landed on this topic, to give a bit of time and attention to the topic of connection. So I suppose the big thing that has had an impact in the last year is, of course, COVID. And it's interesting because the research is beginning to emerge now about what kind of impacts that has had from a network and a connection perspective in particular. And so just looking at some of the reports that have come out recently, a few themes coming out. So people saying that they consistently feel disconnected, that their networks have shrunk. So Harvard Business Review recently said that our personal and professional networks have shrunk by about 16% in the last year. Companies are becoming more siloed, and within teams, the quality of the team interactions is also diminished for quite a number of people. Not for everyone, but for quite a number of people. So there's definitely a few warning signs there that are telling us, okay, we need to pay attention to this as we begin to emerge from this pandemic. And the thing that's at risk is what we call social capital. And social capital is just a fancy way of saying the access to resources and information that you have thanks to those connections, thanks to your connections. So your social capital is actually really important. It's something you can tap into when you need to get something done, and it very much relies on the relationships that you have both professionally and personally. So why are the connections important? Well, I mean, there's lots of reasons, but just to capture a few of them here, finding new opportunities. So for people who are in the job market or thinking of making a move within their careers, 85% of new roles are found through networking. They're very often not something that's going to be advertised and you see a role advertised. It's often through word of mouth, through connections, through recommendations. So keeping opportunities open for yourself, even if that isn't a new role, maybe it's expanding your current business, for example, if you're a business owner, other people are really important for your success. Sparking new ideas and creativity. Sometimes we can become quite blinkered, I suppose, in our own worlds. We live within our own work bubbles sometimes, and the value that people in your network can bring to sparking new ideas and helping you think creatively about ways around challenges and problems, and just bringing that new perspective, so important. And allied to that, I suppose, is the fact that we learn from our connections. We get advice from our connections. We need other people's experience and views to learn from, particularly as you become more seasoned in your career. I would say so much of your learning happens in conversation with others, with a coach, with a mentor, just in professional conversations with others who face similar challenges, or indeed work in a very disparate area, but can actually bring some parallel learnings to you. So really thinking about the value of learning from other people and having someone to tap into for advice, because you're never going to have all the answers yourself. So having some trusted people who you can lean on and use as a confidant or a sounding board is really so important. And last but certainly not least, in the times that we live in, our connections are really important to support our well-being. So, having strong relationships in our professional lives, in our personal lives, is absolutely central to our well-being. And I think, if we think about the amount of time that we dedicate to work, you're looking at a third of your life spent in work. You want the relationships that you have within your working life to be strong and to be fulfilling and to bring something to your life beyond just the transactional nature of work. So your well-being is actually quite dependent on the quality of those relationships that you have, either within your larger network or within your more immediate team. So lots of reasons why we need to consider our connections and think about keeping them strong and being very intentional, I think, as we emerge from the pandemic around, okay, the evidence is saying there's an erosion in these connections. What can I do to make sure that my connections remain healthy and strong, and that I make up for some of the erosion that may have happened over the last year? So just moving on. Ideally moving on, if this screen would move. Excellent. So there's two things we're going to talk about really this evening. One is about networking and your professional network, and the other is about the strength of the connections within the team or the area that you work in. But we're going to start with talking about professional networking, and we were going to run a quick poll just to see people's views or thoughts on networking. So Audrey, if you want to just start the poll there. What we wanted to ask you to do was give us, without overthinking it, on a scale of 1 to 5, your thoughts on networking. So 1 being, I hate it, I avoid it at all costs, right up to 5 being, actually, I love it and I'm, quite tuned into it. I'm quite active as a networker. It's always interesting to see people's views on this. It can be quite a divisive topic.
2 is looking like it's in the lead
looking
there.
Like 2, looking like 2, yeah. So 1 step up from hating it. So not a whole lot of love for networking in the room, and that's okay. So okay, 2. But interestingly, we still have in second place 4. So you know, while the majority of people wouldn't be a huge fan, there are definitely some people who don't mind, I would suspect, and try to actively engage in it. So that's great. I'm just going to turn that off there. So yeah, I mean, I think if we think about networking, it often, certainly for me, can conjure up images of exactly what I've put on the screen here: standing around, making small talk, a cheese and wine reception, wondering when you can leave, thinking about, is this networking? I'm supposed to be doing this. What do I get from this? I'd rather be anywhere else but here. And really, I think what's difficult in that is that it's a mindset that isn't really helpful in terms of networking. Most people dislike it, you know, if we're quite honest. And the fact is that we're, you know, there's a few things that are against us. We're quite lazy. We don't want to have to push ourselves outside our comfort zone and try to establish connections with people that we may not know all that well. And the other thing is, we also tend to have a similarity bias. So we gravitate towards people who are like us. And so we can very quickly find that our networks become, you know, quite homogenous, mirror images of ourselves, people doing quite similar roles in quite similar organizations or teams, and there isn't a whole lot of diversity in it. And really, that's not going to help any of us in terms of really making networking work for us. So the concept that I wanted to talk to you about this evening was something that is called personal boardroom. And this is the concept that what we need to create in our networks is a boardroom like any company would have, a board of advisors who can help us in our careers. And what's lovely about this personal boardroom concept is that it actually gives you a bit of a structure and a way to think about networking quite intentionally. Um, you know, I think a lot of people, and I would hear it in, you know, in coaching conversations, people beat themselves up and say, I need to do more networking. You know, I need to network more, but they don't know where to start, and they don't really know what they're looking for in terms of the composition of a network. So I wanted to talk you through what I think is a lovely concept of personal boardroom that really breaks down the roles that you need to have within your personal boardroom into three buckets. So information roles, so roles that would provide you with new knowledge and insights and ideas. Power roles, so these are people who can get you access to things that you need, whether that is finance or other human resources or just decision makers to get things done. And then finally, development roles, so people who will really support your growth and professional development. And I'm going to move on here to break those down into the 4 different roles that are in each area. And just as I'm going through these, think about, do I have these people in my network? Can I easily think of, you know, who plays that role for me, or is this a gap? And I think that's the most important thing about personal boardroom. It's a way of really auditing, okay, do I have what I need in terms of the right people and roles around me who can really support me? So whether that's supporting me in career advancement, just in my day-to-day work, if I struggle with something, who can I turn to? And so the first one here within the information roles is a navigator. So somebody who can tell me who I need to know and why. So somebody who's already, you know, quite tuned into the area that you're working in, understands sources of power, and can point you in the right direction and tell you, okay, here's people that I suggest you get to know, or information that I feel would be useful to you. The next one then is inspirer, and we all need a bit of inspiration sometimes, and this is about shaking things up, so bringing new ideas, fresh thinking into your consciousness. Sometimes we all get stuck in a rush, or we forget what it was that we loved about the role that attracted us to it in the first place. So it can be really helpful to have someone in our network who inspires us again, who gets us excited about the work that we're doing. Or, you know, if you're looking to pivot and make a change or do something differently within your current role, it's lovely to have somebody who's abundant with ideas and suggestions, you know, that you can really spark off and give you different perspectives that you might never come to yourself. The third role in this area is an expert, and this is someone who can give you advice, and advice very much based on their technical expertise. So somebody who really knows the area that you're working in or are interested in working in and can share that technical expertise with you. And the fourth one then in information roles is around customer voice. So who is that voice that tells you what your customers want? And we all have customers, regardless of what our role is. We all have people who we are there to serve. So if you're a community pharmacist, it's quite obvious who your customers are. But in other roles, you might be a couple of steps removed from the ultimate customer, but it's still really, really important to understand what your customer wants, to understand the shifts in the marketplace, shifts in the demographic in terms of your customers, and also emerging business opportunities. So if you don't have that customer voice giving you useful heads up on things you should be thinking about or things that aren't working, that could be quite a gap. So all those roles are in the information bucket, so about knowledge and insights and ideas. Moving on then to power roles. So these are roles which are about getting access. So access to people or resources, all with a view to getting things done. The first role here is an unlocker. And an unlocker is someone who provides access to resources. So that might be somebody who can, help in terms of funding, help in terms of getting into somebody's diary, help you get the data that you might need for a research project that you're doing, for example. So somebody who, as the illustration shows, holds the key to get something unlocked for you. The next one then is an influencer. Again, this can be a really important role from a career development perspective. So somebody who works behind the scenes to win support and to help you get things done. So sometimes the most important way that you can influence others in the direction that you want them to go is to enlist somebody else to work on them. So that could be support for a business idea or a new project, for example, somebody who will really champion your ideas and influence other people who are important in the success of that. The next one here is a sponsor. So sponsors are people who talk about you when you are not in the room. And there's often that differentiation drawn between sponsors and mentors. So mentors talk to you, but sponsors talk about you when you're not there. So very much an endorsing role. So somebody who really gets the value that you bring, who appreciates the unique skills and capabilities that you have and ideas that you have, but who champions you with other people who are important for your own success. And so a sponsor can be a really important role again for your own career success. And the final one here in terms of a power role is a connector. So this is, and hopefully, you've come across people like this in your career. This is someone who's great at making the introductions and getting you connected in with the people who could be valuable to you. So often these are people who have very strong networks themselves. Somebody who will say, oh, I know someone who can help you with that, or I know someone who does a similar piece of work to that, or I know someone who's been, to that place and can give you more information about it, and they put you in touch and let you get on with it. But it's that connection is the value that they bring. So am I going too fast, Katrina? I might ask if you want to come in at that point.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
You're
No,
fine.
it's so interesting because I'm thinking of all my different roles when I was a pharmacist, and some of them I think at different times it would feel abstract at the
Yes.
time, but now I kind of realize there are people who I met along the way, that I kept in touch with, and actually it helped, and we connected. Do you know what's occurring to me as you talk? There's some people who I know, and I'll talk very personally for me with my role in the Institute. There are people who I've never heard from anywhere who suddenly come saying, I want a job in the Institute, and I really want to talk to you and have you as part of my network. And it's just such a poor way to make a connection. It's much nicer because I normally will say, oh, fantastic. Which of the peer support groups are you in? Are you involved in the peer support or all the different ones? And that's
Yeah.
the point when most people go, oh no, I'm not involved in the Institute at all. And, they say, we love what you're doing. We want to work there, but actually it isn't true. So I think there's something about what you said around the authenticity of it and the
Yeah.
desire to really make a proper connection rather than just connect with people because they might be the unlocker for you. And that's
That's
probably,
absolutely it. And I think that's the key with networking in general, is to think about it as it's as much about what can I give as what can I get, because it comes back to you. I think if you approach it with a mindset of generosity and giving, and being one of these roles for somebody else, it reciprocates. It definitely comes back to you.
Yeah, and there's some fantastic people. Like for me, the what you were talking about earlier, the customer voice, our peer support network have been absolutely the people who serve that for us in our network. They're
Brilliant.
the ones who suggested the webinars. They're the ones, and you know, I didn't always necessarily think they'd work, but they've always kind of steered us as to what pharmacists need. So it's really, it really helps you help people when you use this sort of personal boardroom approach. I like it. Yeah, it can be a bit abstract, but when you actually start to think about it, I think it makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think it's not to put too much pressure on yourself and think, gosh, I don't have these 12 roles in my network. You know, it's something that, you know, even if you go through this tonight and you go, okay, well, what do I have? I have 3 or 4. Okay, so now I know, you know, where I might have some gaps, where I might like to put my attention, you know, where I might be lacking some sort of support or insight. And then you can be a bit more intentional about, well, who could help me with that? And the thing is, you're never going to go to someone and say, I'd like you to be an influencer for me. I'd like you to be a connector. This is for an individual to use to help you make sense of all of this.
Well, Katrina, you are the inspirer for me, by the way,
Oh,
in case you didn't in case you didn't know in my network, that's the role you have.
That is so nice to know. Well, that is so nice to know. That's a good role to have. It is, gosh, I'll have to think about what you are for me, Katrina.
Don't go there. No, keep going. Keep going. You're slipping down now.
I'll go down into a hole. But I do think with this, the mindset of, okay, I'm not networking for the sake of building up all these roles and having people ready should I need them. It's thinking about it in terms of people helping people. So who might be able to help me if and when I need it, but equally, who can I help? Because it happens organically then. The network begins to grow itself because people form a deeper connection with you when you have helped them, and are therefore then much more likely to help you when you reach out. And you may not need an influencer or an unlocker right now, but you might in 6 months or a year. You know, and I think that's sometimes the thing. It's not to wait until you're in a position that you need some of these roles. It's to future proof, okay, what is the kind of diversity of thought and experience that I need around me that can really help.
You know, that's what I'll say about that. And maybe I shouldn't say it because it's not my information share, but I know she wouldn't mind me. Catherine, my colleague, I proposed her to run for PSI Council. And what she couldn't believe was, you know, she got lots of votes and she got in, but actually all the people who she had connected with, she's a lovely lady. Anybody who's ever connected with her will know that she stays in touch and she's so gracious and so lovely. But suddenly these people who she hadn't necessarily known would be there were kind of going, yeah, of course we'll vote for you. And she you know, she always, I'd usually been saying to her, come on, you know, the networking is important. But actually she realized it's not really about networking to get something. It's just having this group of people who, you know, will be able to support in different ways. And likewise, you support them. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And I think it comes home to roost, you know, at some point in time. And I think the more of yourself that you put into being generous and helping other people builds that goodwill that you at some stage need to cash in. But it's there, you know, if you've put the effort into it. I'm just going to move on to the last one then around development roles, so close to my heart. So the people who will provide feedback and challenge and also courage and balance, which is an interesting one. So an improver, somebody who will give you constructive feedback on your performance and development. Sometimes we don't always have this. We can have lovely bosses that we have great working relationships with who tell us we're wonderful, but it doesn't give you a lot to work with. It would be nice sometimes to have more insight into what you can do better. And sometimes that isn't a boss, that might be a colleague who you really trust to say, look, I'm struggling to work on my impact or my presence. Can you just watch me in a meeting and tell me how I come across, or where maybe I'm not as convincing as I should be, or where I wander off on a tangent, or whatever it might be. Anybody can be an improver for you. But think about the people who'll be honest with you and you know, give you the feedback that will really help. The good stuff too, of course, we all need the positive stuff, but we can't be 100% positive. We need something additionally to help us grow as well. So then a nerve giver. This is someone who's like your cheerleader, somebody who, as they say here, strengthens my resolve at difficult times and gives me a sense of purpose. So someone who reconnects you back to, why am I even doing this? Am I good enough for this? You know, that whole imposter syndrome that we sometimes have. I think I'm out of my depth. I'm not sure that this is for me. somebody to help you stay calm, remember all of the strengths and qualities and experience that you have, and give you that shot in the arm, literally. I always like the syringe image there in terms of a nerve giver. Then a challenger, so somebody who will challenge your decisions and call you out on what they might see as a poor decision, help you see your errors and your blind spots. Now, these are quite challenging people to find. It's hard to find somebody who will be that honest with you. Sometimes people don't want to be that honest with you because they're afraid that it will damage the relationship, but it's invaluable if you have someone who will say, I'm not sure you're going down the right track with that, or have you realized that there's this whole other stakeholder group that you haven't engaged with, or the way you're running those meetings is alienating people. Have you thought about approaching it a different way? Somebody who will really challenge you, but you know that they're doing it in the spirit of your development. They're not doing it for any other reason other than to help you grow. And they can be really valuable people to have around you, who see you and who see the areas that can improve as well, and they're honest with you about it. And the last one then is an anchor. So someone who holds me to account for the balance between work and the rest of my life. Often this turns out to be a family member, particularly if you have any workaholics in the group this evening. Somebody who will help you maintain that holistic view of life, because work is one part of our life. And sometimes we need to be accountable to somebody around how we're spending our time, where we're putting our energy, where our emotion is going. Sometimes I think we need someone to pull us back to help us see the big picture, and that's what the anchor is there. So they're the 12 different roles. I think the thing to think about in considering these roles is diversity, having different people who have different perspectives, not just people who are in similar roles doing similar type work in similar type organizations. The diversity is what really gives you the different perspectives. Again, I'm trying to move this on and it's sticking. Okay, there we are. So there's all 12 of them on the screen. So thinking about diversity, thinking about not having too many eggs in the one basket, I think is an important one there. And realizing that no one person can do everything in terms of what you need in a network. And so making sure that you have different connections that bring different things to you in terms of supporting you and helping you learn and grow and succeed. And so we're going to run another quick poll just to get your view on which type of role could make the biggest difference to your current challenges. So would it be, when you think about the things that are a stone in your shoe at the moment, or something that keeps you awake at night in relation to work, do you need information roles, or do you need power type roles, or do you need development roles? Okay, interesting. Development, very much so. Yeah, okay, yeah. And if anybody wants to share in the chat, is there one that has really jumped out at you? Is there one that you think, yeah, actually that would really make a difference, or that's missing for me? If there is, and you're happy to share, please put it up there by all means. But yes, that's interesting. And interesting for you, Katrina, as the IIOP supports development for the
it's
profession.
interesting because for whatever reason of the view, I can't see the results of the poll. I could vote, so I don't know. I presume everybody else. It sounds like you're voting. So what looks like it's coming up as
development roles were in the lead, 65%.
Yeah,
65% and 31% on power roles, 4% on information.
I think there's an aspect of a lot of pharmacists are good at finding information and have people in their network, or they know where to go to, or they will be that role for a lot of people. We tend to, whatever we're in, have that expertise. And pharmacists are thrust into areas of power very quickly, and they probably maybe need more support than they realize. But you can be a couple of weeks out of your out of qualification, and suddenly you're running a pharmacy. And maybe we don't stop to actually think about, do we need help, or, and maybe we have people in our network. But development roles is where, if that's where people are saying, I think that is something that the IIOP is doing more and more of, and peer support pharmacists are doing for each other. The mentoring program
The
in
mentoring
particular
program,
is
yeah.
really going to help with the challenging and the nerve giving. And I'm hoping to bring in 360-degree feedback program. Now, it's not going to necessarily be something we'll be able to do as the IOP, but I'd like to try that out and see, do people find that? Because that for me was a light bulb moment in my career when I got my first 360-degree feedback. So my manager and colleagues and people that I was managing gave me their perception. It was completely different from what I thought. So that challenge, I remember in the early days of the Institute really looking for people who are going to find all the problems and surround myself with what I called the dissenters at the time, because they were always the ones to keep me honest and show me where the big potholes were going to be, and what I really needed to think about ahead of time. And I was so grateful to them for doing that.
Just having a quick look at the chat there. So Aisling, hello Aisling. The developers in your network are so valuable but can be hard to find. They require a relationship of trust and so a very authentic connection. Absolutely, you have to trust that it's safe. It's back to the whole psychological safety concept, really, that it's safe to say to someone, here's something I think you could work on, or here's something that I think is a bit of a gap for you, but to do that in a way that the other person isn't threatened or isn't, feeling that you have anything other than good intentions in saying that. And then also, Vadim, a fair point. To be fair, this is a weighted demographic. We're here because we're seeking development right now. Absolutely.
How smart. Yeah, how true.
Yeah,
That's
it's so
exactly
true.
that. That's a great challenge. Yeah, that's a
no, it
great
is so
challenge.
true. It would be an interesting one to look at outside of this type of a context. But I suppose the main point is this is a tool that I think you can very easily take and use. There's a website that I've included at the final slide. It's My Personal Boardroom. You can go in and set up your own account. It's all free. There's some great information in there. You can keep track of where you have people in certain roles, where you have gaps. It will then give you suggestions about how you might want to reach out depending on where your gaps are. And again, just a nice simple way of demystifying networking. So rather than feeling, I know I should network, I don't know where to start, this is a way to start. This is a way to give yourself that bit of a push and say, okay, let me think of it in terms of roles, and then I can begin to match people to roles. But start with the what the roles are that you need. So I think once you've done that exercise and you have a sense of, okay, I know where I have some gaps, or I know where I'd like to invest a bit of time or intention in terms of developing my professional network, I think the next question then becomes, well, where do I turn to find those people? Again, I have a bit of a lag here moving my slides on, so sorry about that. And so I wanted to talk to you about the concept of strong ties, weak ties, and dormant ties. And this is about who those connections are and in what pond you might go fishing to find some more connections for your professional network. And I think if you look at the illustration on the left there, that is our comfort zone. They are connections to people that we have strong ties with. So the people that we see often, that we know well, that we have a lot in common with, are strong ties. And not surprisingly, they're the easiest people to tap into if you have a question or need some advice. But what's really interesting from the studies in this area is that actually your connections through weak ties can actually be much more valuable to you. And when we say weak ties, these are people at the periphery of your network. So not the people you see all the time and interact with all the time, but maybe the people that you see occasionally, or they are an acquaintance, a friend of a friend, someone that you met on a couple of occasions, but you don't know that necessarily well. And then the third group is around dormant ties, which are essentially a type of weak tie. So these are people who used to be strong ties, but that you've fallen out of touch with. And so we define dormant ties as someone who you haven't been in touch with for 3 or more years. But those people who are dormant ties are very valuable because you already have the trust and the relationship built up with them. You've just let it slide a little. But they have found in studies, again, that advice from your dormant ties is often rated as being better than from your current connections. So a lovely piece on the power of reconnection there in the MIT Sloan Management Review, where people were asked to rate the value of advice that they received from their dormant ties versus their current ties, and they rated it higher. And I suppose the reason is that, with your strong ties, the people who you see a lot and are in contact with a lot, you have similar shared experiences, you're exposed to the same type of thinking, you're mixing in similar circles. But with your weak or your dormant ties, those people have a new, fresh perspective on the world that you can't get from people who are closer to you. And really it's thinking about, well, how can I reach out to those weak ties or reignite the dormant ties? And I think just socially, it's difficult to reach out to a weak tie. I met you once, or my friend. That can be quite difficult. But your dormant ties, the investment in the relationship has already been made, and 9 times out of 10, they're only delighted to hear from you again. Life is busy, and we sometimes do let things slide. Old colleagues, old friends, old supervisors, old bosses, whatever they might be, they're still there somewhere, and they might still be really valuable. Katrina, I don't know, from a pharmacy perspective, who might those dormant ties be through a typical pharmacy career?
I think we're such a small community. There's so many places where you've worked, or you see people, but particularly what springs to mind are old classmates. So people that you maybe haven't seen, that you had the greatest 4 years with, but then you all went your different ways. And it is always so lovely to reconnect. And our class reconnected recently over a 20-year reunion. I hate saying that so long, but yeah, it's really nice. And I used to say, when I lectured in college, I used to say to people, like, think of those people in the class who you like and who you don't like and who you don't get on with and who you meet, or whatever the word is, and kind of fall out with. You could be going into an interview with them in 20 years' time, or they could be coming in and sitting in front of you. You just don't know where you're going to meet those people again, because pharmacy is small. So, making sure that you're just always your best self with people, and treat people well. And it's nice when people reach out as well. So maybe I was a bit negative earlier when I was saying I really don't like it when people come with one specific need. But what I do really love is when people have an interest in an area and they reach out, and they either to share something or ask advice, and we build up, from weak ties to stronger ties. But yeah, I think the dormant ties, that you have shared history in some way. And all of us know where, we've gone to a pharmacy and we've met somebody who knew somebody we worked with in another pharmacy, or we find somebody that we haven't worked with for years. So yeah, it's that kind of thing, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty common, but I think we're maybe not great at reigniting them or seeing the value of them.
Definitely not. And it's difficult to be the one who makes the first move to actually send that email or that LinkedIn connection and say, I know it's been a while, but I really would, love to chat again, or to hear how you're getting on. And actually, just in terms of how to do that, what I would advise is to focus on giving. It's a really powerful way to reestablish a connection, or just to connect with someone in the first place. So you're not going with an ask, you're going with a give. So what can you give? You could give a link to a podcast. I was listening to this podcast, and it made me think of you in that time that we worked together. Or I came across this journal article, or here's a book I read, and I thought you would enjoy it. I know it's been a while. How are you? But you're reaching out to give something to that person. It might be an invitation to something. It might be that you've read an update from them on a personal life event that has happened, and that's your hook to say, I wanted to pass on my congratulations. Whatever it is. I would say be brave and send that email and reconnect, because I know I've done it with some people that I would have worked with years ago, and they've done it with me, and it's actually lovely. I really love reconnecting with people and hearing what's going on. And actually, a couple of those people have been really useful to me in terms of saying, we've met for lunch. I'm working on this project. Oh, are you? That's interesting. There's something similar that I'm doing. Oh, let me share this document with you, or whatever it might be, or let me talk you through the approach that we took. And it's actually turned out to be really useful from a work perspective, as well as just from a social perspective, which is lovely. So yeah, focusing on giving. And that's my next mini topic here, which is around the concept of givers, takers, and matchers. So I don't know if many people have come across this, but I think in the context of this topic of connection, it's an interesting one to think about. And so there's an organizational psychologist called Adam Grant. He's in Wharton Business School, and he wrote this book, Give and Take: Why Helping Others Drives Our Success. It's just a really inspiring book in terms of thinking about the importance of being generous and giving, and how any connection from a work perspective requires a bit of give and take. But one of the really interesting concepts from the book is that there are 3 different styles within the workplace: givers, takers, and matchers. So givers being people who are very much focused on what can I do for you? And his research shows that that's about a quarter of any typical workplace. Then there are the takers. What can you do for me? Just a little under 20% there. And I think we've all come across them at any point in our career. There's definitely takers along the way who are in it for themselves. And then the vast majority of us are matchers. So I'll do something for you if you do something for me. So somebody who, is happy to help out, but kind of expects something in return and keeps track of that. So givers, takers, and matchers. And so what I wanted to ask was your views on which of those groups do you think is the most successful? So Audrey has a poll on this. So if we think about success at work, do you think that you're more successful if you're a giver and always willing to help others, a taker, someone who's pretty much focused on themselves, or a matcher?
I feel I have FOMO here.
Sorry, Katrina.
Oh, you can't see it, Katrina.
Matchers in the lead.
I have FOMO. I'm like, I can't vote and I can't see. I don't know what it is.
I don't know why you can't see that,
I don't
Katrina,
know either.
sorry.
No worries.
But yes, so we have matchers at 74%, givers at 19%, and takers at 6%. Okay, so this is really interesting. So everyone's backing the matchers here. So I'm just going to turn off the poll here. So in terms of which group is most successful, the least successful, if I can get this to move on, please move. I don't know why it keeps freezing on me. The least successful. No. Sorry, folks. I don't know why this is not moving. Yes, the least successful group are the givers. The takers and the matchers are right in the middle in terms of being average. And then the most successful group are also givers. And this blew my mind when I first saw it. It was at, I think I went to a lecture in the IMI a few years ago. It was a prof from Stanford, and she was quoting this book. And I just thought, okay, I don't get this, but the explanation is really interesting. It's the type of giver that you are. So there are givers who are unsuccessful givers, the people who are least successful in the left-hand side of our graph here. And they are people who feel that they have to say yes to everything and help in every relationship, in every working relationship and personal relationship that they have. But they are selfless givers. They do it to their own detriment and sometimes at the expense of their own work. And so they end up in the least successful group. The most successful givers are the people who are a little more strategic about how they give. Again, I'm trying to move on and it's stuck.
Sorry, Katrina, I don't know what the story is. It seemed to be working.
I don't know.
Earlier.
Yeah, now it moves. Just seems to take a minute. There's a bit of a lag, but we'll get there eventually.
Mm.
So the successful givers, this is a quote from the book, successful givers match their desire to help others with ambitious goals of their own. So you can absolutely be a giver and help other people in a work capacity without losing sight of your own goals and objectives. And the way to do that, well, there's a few suggestions. So one is to set boundaries. And I know boundaries can often be an issue for many of us, but setting boundaries in terms of your giving. So, thinking about who you help, when you help, and how you help. So you don't have to help everybody who asks. You don't have to help instantly or straight away. You don't have to help in a way that takes hours or days of work. It's being quite judicious about how you give that help is the important thing with this. And so one of the things that we talk about is 5-minute favors. So yes, you can absolutely help someone, but think about what can you do in 5 minutes that could be helpful to that person. So might you introduce them to someone who you think could be helpful to them? Would you share an article that you think that would be handy for them to read? Would you send on a slide deck that you think, yeah, this might be worth sharing? So 5-minute favors. Weed out the takers. So I think recognizing in the first place that there is definitely a group within any typical workplace who are takers and who are that way minded, recognizing that is potentially happening in the people who are within your professional environment, and eliminating the requests from them. I mean, we can't literally weed them out, but weeding out the intensity of ask of you, particularly, if they have found you helpful in the past and you have been a giver and you've helped out wherever you could, not to continue to do that indefinitely, because they will keep on taking. And the other thing, particularly if you're in a leadership position, is to try and encourage a climate of help seeking. So, you can only give in response to a request for help. When we help other people, it's typically, I think, about 80% of the time because they have asked us for some help. And people are generally very happy to help, but you have to be willing to be a bit vulnerable and say, this is what I need help with. So there's a lovely practice in the IT industry where they do daily stand-ups in the morning. Within software development teams, and they have 3 questions that each person speaks to. What did I work on yesterday? What am I working on today? What help do I need today? And so it normalizes that asking for help. It's expected that you're asking for help of some sort. I don't know if that is something that would work within a pharmacy, Katrina. Could it? Would it?
Yeah, we would have. Well, yeah, I suppose it depends on the pharmacy, and it'd be interesting to hear in the chat. But we certainly would have. I remember in pharmacy using those sorts of things, of having a quick check-in in the morning, but not necessarily always asking what we need help with, or who can I help with. But yeah, the team in the institute are brilliant at doing this. Actually, you'll often hear somebody going, "I've actually a bit of extra capacity today if anybody needs help with something," which is
Brilliant.
great.
That is
Yeah.
great, because then it's easier to ask for help if everybody's doing it, And in terms of building connections, you feel much more connected to somebody who you've had an opportunity to help, and they've been gracious enough to receive that and thank you for it. It helps solidify that connection. So creating and then normalizing the help-seeking behavior is really important. I read another lovely study about a nursing ward where they had one nurse who was dedicated to asking all the other nurses what help they needed. And the levels of stress reduced and the levels of well-being rocketed, because everybody felt it was okay to ask for help. It was okay to say, I'm struggling with something. They didn't have to be the one person who put themselves out there and did it. So there was an assigned role for that ward. You're the person who sees what help people need. So it's just a really interesting one in the context of building connections, thinking about givers and takers and matchers. And if you want to be a successful giver, what you need to do that, you still meet your own goals and objectives as well. And Adam Grant has a website you can have a look at where you can take a quiz to determine if you are a giver, taker, or matcher. Most of us probably have a good sense of what we are, but it is kind of a fun quiz to do if anybody's interested in that.
Do you think takers know they're takers, Katrina?
It's a good point. I mean, you need a degree of self-awareness and emotional intelligence, I think, to figure that out. But I think takers often run out of road at some point. I think they get called out at some point. You might get away with it for a while, or you might get away with it as you move between maybe different employment locations. But I think it catches up with you, to be honest.
Yeah.
It might work for a while. So I'm just looking at the time there. I'm going to move on just to finish to talk about team connections. So we've talked about your network. We've talked about where you might look in terms of those weak and dormant ties if you're looking to expand the roles within your network and the quality and diversity of your network. We've talked about asking for help and, the whole concept of giving and taking. And I just wanted to end on team connections and the evidence showing that for some teams, COVID has resulted in quite a hit to that feeling of connection within a team. But there was an INSEAD report this year, and it said that 45% report a decline in team relationships. And interestingly, 31% feel their team is actually stronger as a result of COVID. And then 24% report no change at all. So what we're wondering is whether your team is like our little picture here. Has anybody become a bit disconnected? Are you still going strong? Are there a few people breaking away around the edges? Is there still that same sense of team connection? And Audrey has the poll there if you want to start that last poll, Audrey. And the question is, is your team connection weaker than pre-COVID times? Is it stronger, or is it about the same?
I think that must be really interesting for different workplaces, because, some places where they're office based and they're all at home, you'd imagine it's going to be weaker. But I'd imagine some pharmacy teams have had to really pull together, or maybe they're driving each other's scatty. I don't know. I can't see the poll, so I don't know.
Oh, well, it's still going. Actually, it's changing. The FOMO is kicking in again, Katrina, is it?
I know.
I think it might be because you're the host, Katrina. I think.
Yeah, I don't know, but sure, look, it doesn't matter. It's grand. I'm not going to skew it that much.
So it's at 39% say it's about the same in terms of team connection. And I guess what we don't know is whether it was strong or weak prior to COVID. 29% say stronger than before, and 32% say weaker than before.
Wow.
So that's an interesting one. And I guess our unknown is whether it was strong pre-COVID. If it's about the same, and for most people, what was the strength of that connection previously?
Yeah. And people should feel free to type comments as well in the comment box. Mary Claire is saying there that she worked in a pharmacy where they did 5-minute pauses in the morning and afternoon, and they could review what tasks they were working on and help prioritization. Isn't that lovely?
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, feel free to share any ideas about what's made team working more stronger or weaker if you feel like it. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right, Katrina, that the nature of the team is probably correlated with whether there is more of a sense of disconnection or not. Like if it's a team that are now entirely remote and haven't seen each other literally face to face in a year, versus a team who are frontline and actually still in there working together every day, it's definitely going to make a difference. But there were quite a number of people who said that their team connection is maybe a bit weaker than it was previously. And so I'm just going to end on a couple of suggestions of things that you can do to improve connection within your team. And these might be useful for the people who say it's kind of the same as it was before. I think team connection is something that we always want to keep working on, that we always want to try to continue to improve. And so the first one is from the Surgeon General in the US. So a chap called Vivek Murthy. So he's our Tony Holohan over there. He was appointed under Obama and he's been reappointed now under Biden as the Surgeon General again. But his life's work is around connection and loneliness in particular, loneliness in society, loneliness in the workplace. And he sees it very much as a prominent health issue. So one of the statistics that he quite often quotes is the people who feel disconnected, who feel they don't have strong working relationships, solid relationships, and social relationships. It's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And so he's on a mission to try and highlight the importance of connection and the risks of loneliness. And loneliness can be an issue within work as much as outside of work. We spend a huge amount of our time in work, and we know that predictors of people who are happy in their job are often related to how well they get on with their teams and whether they feel a sense of connection with their teams. So a long intro to say what he does with his team is something that he calls Inside Scoop. And at their weekly team meeting, there's 5 minutes at the start of each team meeting, and an individual is nominated for that week to share something about themselves using only photos. So they're given autonomy to focus on whatever they want to share. They don't have to overshare about anything that's too personal that they don't want to talk about, but it gives them 5 minutes to paint a pen picture with photos of something that is about them or important to them or is happening in their lives. And it's about getting beyond the kind of team building activities where everybody throws a ball at each other or out in a field or, whatever. This is about really making people feel seen and as seen for who they are and valued for who they are and the unique contribution and the unique person that they are. And he says that his team is thriving since he started doing this. So
I have to say, the cynical bit of me thinks, oh, will people just do like they do on Facebook or Instagram and have this lovely picture of themselves? You need honesty and integrity, almost like what Aisling was talking about. People need to do it properly, don't they?
Absolutely do. So you might need to tee up a couple of people who get it to start and set the ball rolling. And I think, again, if you're in a team leadership position, you have to role model, the vulnerability again, to share something about who you are or what you value or something exciting that's happening in your life outside of work, because it's about seeing each other as whole people as opposed to just a team working on tasks together. And then okay, trying to move on again. I'm sure it will eventually appear if I keep pressing.
God, I wonder why it's so slow.
I don't know. the
There you
final
go. Oh, I
one here
love
is
this. I
something
love
that
this one.
and I've used this with some teams, and I find it really, really powerful, and it's really simple. It's a template that anybody who's on the call is welcome to take and use. A user manual for me. So when we get a washing machine, when we get a dishwasher, we get a manual with it that tells us this is how to use this machine. This is how to, get the best out of this machine. And this is something that you can ask people to fill in to share with their teams. And it's basically a series of questions that give your team members something more of an insight into who you are and how you like to work. So I think it's always useful to see a worked example. So this is not me. This is a sample, and there might be bits of me in there actually now that I read through it. But it's a sample, because I would always share a sample with teams who are doing an exercise like this, and say, look, here's the sort of thing that you could put into this, because it's easier than starting with a blank page. But talking through, how I like to work, things that I value, best ways to communicate with me, ways I like to receive feedback, things that I need, and then things that I struggle with, some things that I love, and anything else that you want to know about me. And it's a way of just allowing an individual to say, look, there's a few things that you need to know about working with me. And some of them are really boring stuff, like, put a meeting straight into my calendar. You don't have to email me first. Or I like to have, a weekly one-to-one with my direct manager, or actually once a month is fine for me. Thanks. I don't need to catch up with you that often. I just check email 3 times a day, for example. I wish I did just check email 3 times a day, but some people do, and apparently it's a very effective time management technique. But if you don't tell people that that's what you're doing, how will they know? They email you, they don't hear back for 3 hours. But if you own these ways of working and how you like to work, and just let your team know, it greases the wheels for the team to be able to work more efficiently together, but also to actually feel a bit more connected to each other, because you understand a lot more about that individual. So you can share things that you love. It might be a pet, it might be, as I put in here, Liverpool Football Club, but then equally the things that sometimes cause problems within teams, or even within colleagues. And I work in our HR team. I see the things that end up as HR issues, and they often start with little things like these, where somebody takes offense because they didn't understand someone else's intention or motivation. And I find that this is just a nice, simple way that you can share these things with each other. People share as much or as little as they're comfortable sharing, but it's really valuable in terms of just helping to improve that team connection.
Do you know where I saw this used? I saw somebody on LinkedIn saying that they were doing a new job, going to a new job, and they said, so I have prepared my user manual for me to share with the team, so that they can know when, I won't be available, take up the phone and all. And I thought, wow, a bit weird, or is it really good? And the more I thought about it, because they were proactively doing it themselves to help the team, I thought, yeah, that's really good. On the aspect of social media, David is asking, do you have any insights or on advice on the pitfalls of social networking tools like LinkedIn? Are they too shallow and unfocused, or how are they?
Look, I'm not a huge LinkedIn fan, but I know that people rave about LinkedIn. Because of, I guess, the type of person I am, I'm much more about personal connection, and I will be very old school and just send someone an email rather than, link in with them. But I know it would probably be advantageous for me to really work on building a LinkedIn network. But personally, I don't see the value in having huge numbers of connections to people who you really don't know at all. They're not even weak ties or dormant ties. Like, there are people connected to people who they literally do not know and don't know why they're connected to them.
I think that's the secret, isn't it?
Yeah.
I find LinkedIn good. I find it a great way of feeling people. We found our own lovely Audrey through LinkedIn, so I think
Brilliant.
there are ways that it can work. But I'll refuse people that I don't know, haven't met, or haven't some connection with. But it's I think it's again how you use it. A lot of people will. I'd say I now probably refuse more LinkedIn's, easily than I ever would get, because I have to protect my network. So I would know lots of really interesting, cool people in the community pharmacy and hospital pharmacy and industry pharmacy, and the amount of recruiters who try to link in with me because they just want access to my network, which I won't give them. So I think you have to really care about your network and look after it when you have one as well, and not let it be exploited. because
Yeah.
that can happen too. So
Yeah.
I think it's a double-edged sword, we're saying, is it, Katrina?
I think so. I think there's never any harm in, you know, really connecting with someone in a more personal way. If you really want to, you know, if you think about, say, even that personal boardroom concept, that's only 12 people. And in fact, that might only be 6 people. One person might play a couple of roles for you. You know, it doesn't have to be huge numbers. Just in the interest of time, because I see we're at 9 o'clock, just a few takeaways. So I would really suggest that you use that concept of personal boardroom to critically evaluate your current network. So think about where you have gaps, think about where you might have too much over reliance on one person or a couple of people or just within your team. And equally challenge yourself to think about who can I help, and do go onto their website because they have great resources there and a whole online tool that you can use for free to build up that personal boardroom view. The weaker the dormant ties, why not challenge yourself to think of 3 people that you could reconnect with? Try it and see what happens. It might get nowhere, or it might actually be a revelation for you. So, you know, why not say, okay, that's what I'm going to take away from this tonight. I'm going to identify 3 people, even one person you could reconnect with, and see what happens. And the last one then is around looking for ways to build those high quality connections on your teams. So activities that really allow people to feel seen and heard and valued, because that's where the real quality connections at work happen. You know, it's not in the emails, etc. It's about allowing people to feel that they, you know, that they matter, that they bring something unique, and that people see that and that they value it. So that's all I had for tonight. I'm going to go into the chat now because I didn't have it open there.
I think you've actually answered most of it. Poor old David dropped off for a second and came back in again. I think he just missed your answer. So he can either stay on or he can listen to the recording. I think that's been really comforting for me in terms of connections and network, because it kind of takes away that feeling of people trying to exploit each other. I know that sounds wrong, but I'm very mindful of human connection, and so but I really do always appreciate when people reach out and on a shared interest. I liked what you said there about that. So listen, what we do, Katrina, is it's 9 o'clock, so we'll finish up, but what I will do is leave the cameras on for a few minutes, and I'd like to thank you very sincerely, Katrina. Always when you come, you're just a paragon of sense and pragmatism, and I really got a lot out of it, and I hope others did too.
Thanks,
we're
Katrina.
Going to be having our next webinar. Audrey, you might pop in and tell me. It's in June, isn't it?
9th of June.
It's 9th of June.
Our last one before our summer break. So we're welcoming back the National Cancer Care Programme, the NCCP team, and they're going to talk about the early detection of skin cancer. Okay, so that'll be really timely coming up with summer as well. And we have a poll that we've put into our chat. If people, I always love the fact that people stay right till the end. You know, you always know that a speaker has been engaging when everybody's still there. You know, when you see them all drop off 5 minutes in, which we've never seen it. That's when you would want to start worrying. But do please give us your feedback and tell us what you like and what you want to hear more of, and some honest feedback. And yeah, Katrina, thank you very much. It was really great.
No problem at all. You're very welcome. And if anyone wants to turn on their mic or has a question or a comment or an observation, please do.
What do you do with the connections? You know, the way you said that there's some connections that really you need to break them, or that maybe they're connections that you really had, but everybody's moved on, but you kind of feel you need to keep, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it's hard to break connections. Does that ever come up?
It is. I think it's a bit like what happens in relationships, isn't it? The ghosting thing where you just don't reply to emails, or you're unavailable.
I've never done that very well. Yeah,
I don't know. But at the same time, like if somebody is a taker from Adam Grant's terminology, and they're looking to get a lot of your time, or take you down a path that really isn't of interest to you or of relevance to you anymore, I think you have to find a way to have a respectful conversation to say that's not my path anymore, or I'm really stretched. Everybody is. I think people understand how time poor any working professional is these days. So I think we can always point to the time issue in terms of our availability.
One of the things I've missed, it's been brilliant having the webinars. I've really enjoyed seeing people, but nothing replaces that having a cup of coffee before the talk or after the talk. Or
I know, and I saw Margaret had said that in the text as well, not being able to meet up outside of work makes it harder to keep connected. Like there is nothing like the energy that you have face to face with people. Yeah. But thank God we've had this technology the last year. If we didn't have this, how much more disconnected would we be?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's been really great, and I've enjoyed having the webinars. They've been a great source of kind of just energy and connection with the profession. So thanks to everybody who's joined us this evening. And like I say, we'll stay around for another few minutes. If anybody wants to turn on their camera, their mic, or ask any questions or make any comments, please do, because it's always a nice time. Margaret, thanks for turning on your camera. It's lovely to see you.
Hi, Margaret.
Yeah, good to see you. Looking so well.
Oh God. I have a meeting after this one to do with life